Zombie, zombie, it's in your head.
Ah, my ears.
In your head.
My ears. Stop.
People don't know what you're talking about there, or what I'm talking about, or what you're even talking about.
Everyone knows what you're talking about.
No.
It's one of the... Are you kidding? That song is like...
Not Americans.
People all over the world think that's the anthem of Ireland.
No, not
They
America.
do.
Only rugby people.
Yeah. No, I don't.
People know the song maybe, but that's it. But they probably don't even know what the song is about, and the context in which the song was written, and what it was.
Zombies, obviously.
No, yeah, exactly. They think it's just about zombies. It's complicated, and well, all it is, I'll give people a quick rundown. It's basically, there's a Rugby World Cup going on in Ireland. The national team are playing in the Rugby World Cup, and that song by the Cranberries, which is an Irish group, or former Irish group, wrote that song back in the 90s, I think. And it has become the kind of unofficial anthem that's sung by the crowd, the Irish supporters at these matches. Kind of like an unofficial anthem for Ireland, you know. And it's basically, it seems to have been taken, it was promoted by the media for the crowd to do this. And somehow the crowd decided to go with what the media wanted them to do. Which
I think they just started playing it out over the tannoy.
Sorry, they started playing it.
They're super popular in France.
Right.
Cranberries are known by the French.
But they're doing it in Ireland as well, at Irish matches in Ireland.
Ah, okay.
It started there, and it was promoted as this should be a song that you sing at the end. And subtly, it's a counterpoint to more traditional Irish nationalistic songs that would have been sung at those kind of rugby matches. Because as we know, as everybody knows today, nationalism anywhere in any country is a very, very bad thing, and you have to remove it, especially at sporting events, because you know what sporting events are like. People get together, and there's an identity, and it can become nationalism. And you know, one step from nationalism is Nazism. So
exactly. Next thing is gas chambers and goose stepping.
Yeah.
Look, Ryan in the chat says it's not the Irish national anthem. You see, everyone thought it was.
He's joking. He must be joking. Tell me you're joking, Ryan.
He is. He's kidding.
He better be.
Like, Ryan's smarter than that.
He better be.
No, but it is telling that at a time when finally there's, like, I don't know, an Irish sporting cultural achievement of note, possibly, which they haven't even won the World Cup yet. Like, you know, the apogee of, for finally on the apex, our expression of our nationalism isn't our anthem.
But
it's a song by the Cranberries, which was like the antithesis of pride in your country.
It was denigrating.
It's in your head, i.e., all this shooting and violence. It's like it's in your head. It's psychosomatic and it's everywhere, and it's free floating anxiety, as Matthias Desmet said in his book about totalitarianism. And oh my God, get it out! And it was just this kind of liberal interpretation of events in Northern Ireland that helped cement in the generations of the 80s, 90s, and since then, that it was something just like a mind virus. Let's just push it away. This awful thing, it's like I say, it's free floating. It's not anchored in any history. It's not anchored in any actual connections to anyone who it lives in just 50 miles away in the north of Ireland. You know, it. Anyway, we could go on and on about this, but it is very interesting. We know what this means. I think where do we start explaining this?
I think it's attached to the whole immigration thing going on now. It's a cultural thing. It's basically propaganda. For me, it boils down to when people are singing that at national rugby games on the world stage. They think, okay, it's not a big thing in the US, but it's a big thing in Europe and a few other countries. It's an example of propaganda having
kosher nationalism or approved.
Yeah, it's propaganda.
Globalism
it's government
approved
/ media propaganda that has infected the minds of people, or been successful in the minds of the people at these games. And it's designed, ultimately, one part of it is designed to promote immigration.
How do you get to immigration, though?
It's super. I just go, boom, immigration, right there. I just go, immigration all the time.
I can see how it promotes no violence, no war, peace under globalist terms.
But nationalism has to be destroyed in any country that is going to be subject to mass immigration from obviously, other
do away
other
with all borders.
Yes.
And let everything melt into one big...
But the culture in the country that's being subjected to this immigration, was mass immigration country, that can't have a strong national identity that's tied to, that goes back in history, because that country was, like in the case of Ireland, as a white country, a white,
ginger
Northern European white country.
Ginger.
And I'm not saying that. I'm just saying. I'm not making any judgment. I'm just saying that's what it is. And if you have to destroy that long-term old style nationalism that has a history goes back into Irish history, because it's not accommodating. Because Irish nationalism comes with Irish culture, and Irish culture is about songs in part. And a lot of those Irish nationalist songs are synonymous with a shared history that is shared by the people as a distinct ethnic identity. And if people today are singing that, then subtly, it's not friendly. It's not explicitly anti-immigration. Obviously, none of those songs are anti-immigration because immigration wasn't around at the time.
Yeah.
But it talks about that. Those kind of songs talk about Ireland and Irish people as a specific, unified group, and that just doesn't go well with immigration. So you've got to get rid of it. And so they replace it with a song that denigrates everything nationalistic.
Yeah.
That's my take on it anyway.
Yeah. HFL said in the chat, it's the antithesis of Irish rebel songs.
Of course.
It's that incorrect. And there's also a two-stage process to this. The Irish national anthem officially has been replaced at Irish rugby games anyway, abroad. At home they play both, but they invented a new one to play to others abroad.
Right.
The Ireland Standing Tall song.
Right.
They literally denationalised that already. Now they've gone one step further. There's no Ireland Standing Tall. It's just in your head zombies.
Yeah. Well, they do still play the one at the beginning, but that's the end anthem. Zombie is the end anthem. Anyway, it's just an interesting cultural kind of data point of where we're at and the level of propaganda.
Do you get the sense that revolution's in the air?
Where?
Everywhere. Well, I'm specifically thinking I've seen two high-profile figures, kind of like Russell Brand's, in that they were celebrities in the noughties and more recently 2010s. Actors, TV presenters who were woken up and have become kind of unofficial spokespeople of the roughly 10% we think were shocked awake by COVID. And they basically are tweeting it's time for a revolution.
Who are they?
Millions of likes and retweets. The two guys in mind, the TV presenter was the Scottish guy, Niall, long hair, did a great monologue during COVID. I get his surname. Niall Oliver. And the other one is the actor turned, now he's actually back on TV as a TV anchor on GB News, Lawrence Fox.
Yeah, but they're right-wing.
They can be castigated as that, but they're from the mainstream. They can paint them all they want, like they've done with Russell Brand recently as well. But they're explicitly let's talk about revolution kind of thing. And it's...
Talking about revolution.
I know. We've been, Jesus Christ, been here lots of time before, and we've seen the yellow vest thing come and go in France, but I think people are reaching some limits. Huh?
They may be, and maybe then there'll
This
be a
winter.
response. If there's some kind of read that the government gets on that kind of thing, we talked about the Russell Brand thing last week, and we'll talk a little bit about it again this week in terms of the extreme lengths they went to shut him down.
Did we ever call it right?
Yeah. Well,
Day one.
Pretty obvious, right?
Well, it took 7 years for it to be outed that the judge who basically kept Assange cooped up in the embassy and wouldn't let him get asylum to Ecuador was married to a high-profile conservative figure who was involved in explicitly lobbying on behalf of some Americans to nail him. That took 7 years. It's taken 7 days to find the same connection.
Yeah.
In Brand's case. That's nuts.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute. First one, just a little data point here. Maybe you have something else to say about it because it's connected to other things, but this little tidbit, a story, I think it's in, what is that in Russian? To go down a little bit.
Oray Novosti. It's the Russian... Russian
BBC
news agency.
The Russian BBC basically said that the Russian military destroyed a Leopard with a crew from the Bundeswehr in the Northern Military District.
Yeah.
Interesting. Scouts of the Russian armed forces told RA Novosti about the destruction of a Leopard with a crew from Germany. So, and above in the text it just says, when we stopped their quote-unquote meat assault and captured the Leopard, we moved towards and burnt the equipment in the hope of taking the talker. And we discovered that the tank driver was seriously wounded and the rest died. The mechanic, when he woke up and saw us, began shouting, "Nicht schießen! Nicht schießen, don't shoot!" So that's not Ukrainian Nick Schiessen, the driver of the damaged tank said several times that we are not mercenary, but a Bundeswehr soldier, and the entire crew were from one company. So how often is that happening? I mean, it's probably hard to say, but I mean, that's moving a step further. We don't know if that just happened recently or if that's been ongoing for quite some time. That there's actually NATO soldiers in actively taking part in like frontline stuff. We know they're all over the place in terms of advisors, and there's mercenaries and all that kind of stuff. But actual kind of signed up members of the German armed forces, the German military, in a tank on the front lines in Ukraine.
I think it's massive. I think it's substantial.
Yeah.
This wasn't the
first,
a 1 in a million shot. It's also been happening since the beginning. There's a lot of things to cover here, but of course it's all circumstantial. Well, the first thing to note is that report, although someone did an auto-translate and you saw that text in that tweet from Novosti in English, it's actually not been published in English. It's exclusively in Russian language media. Most of these reports are only in Russian language media. The Russian government has apparently made a decision, because you can scan RT. When you hear these rumors, you go to RT or Sputnik or something and you look for it, and they don't mean it. For now, for whatever reasons, they're probably to do with maintaining a certain level of not escalating this beyond where it ever currently is. The Russians do not draw attention. So that would be an explainer for why you would think. But you have to get your head out of the PR, the propaganda space that they're trying to put it in vis-a-vis the Russians. They lie, cheat, and steal about everything. That's actually not true. They're very truthful, and then they're actually very not forthcoming with things that would give them a propaganda coup. But anyway, it's been rumors so far, or it's freely reported only in Russian language media.
But you'd have to assume, we've assumed for quite a long time that that's the case, that
it's
not being talked about.
Look at the Washington Post halfway through last year did a big expose, and it wasn't the only one. I remember others in the New York Times, where they said, you know what, actually, when fighting started on day one, a special unit was sent in. Most were withdrawn. Most advisors, they left the embassy and everything. Americans left. Oh shit, here come the Russians. At the same time, flights were going in. And they admitted at the time to a ballpark figure of 50 specialists to help with special stuff. Right. Okay. And then, you know, over the years, you can collect them, you can find them, and there's about 6 or 7 such. And between them and the British, who admitted 50 here and there, you can say there's several hundred active at any one time. And they're specialists. We're not telling you what they're doing, but they're doing something serious. Okay, that's one layer of it. The second layer of it is how many actual Americans and British accents have been heard on the videos. Now, that layer is usually parlayed into whether volunteers.
Yeah.
But then you find some of them, when they died, they quit on like February 23rd, 2022, and signed up for the Ukrainian military on February 24th.
But we know that happens. Yeah.
So and they're like 23 and 4 years old. Yeah. That's not a volunteer. That is someone who is on assignment. Whether he's sent there or whether he volunteers, it kind of besides the point.
Quote unquote.
He is welcome to return to the British Army, the American military, at any time he wants.
Yeah, but
he's not persona non grata anymore.
No,
he's one of ours.
Yeah, well, we know that.
Here's another layer of reports. There's 6 or 7 going back over the last year. It began by saying, we started airlifting some Ukrainian soldiers to our American military bases in Germany. We've also started airlifting them as far as Japan.
Those are Americans.
Actually, we're also airlifting Americans. They're volunteers to our military bases.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, we know this happened. This is just a repeat of, this is from the Iraq playbook, right? I mean, we know that.
Oh, do we? That never became known. But
no,
yes, we definitely suspect.
Well, no, I mean, it's so long ago. Iraq is so long ago that it's not even a secret. It's been talked about by large numbers of, at the time, active military personnel who just quit and they were doing it progressively in droves as the Iraq War dragged on, because there was way more money to be had in as a contractor, Blackwater, etc. So that's the same. That's what they do. You take regular, because for a a private military contractor, to sign up with them and go into a war zone and do some job or whatever, you need to have a significant, ideally you have significant military experience. So you're not just going to find enough former US military personnel who have retired 10 years ago, because first of all, there aren't enough of them, and second, because at the end of the day in Iraq there was something like 200,000 private military, more PMCs in Iraq than there were actual regular troops. So there was definitely a concerted plan to basically replace, as the first years of the war went on, to replace a significant number of active US military personnel in Iraq with PMCs, PMC people. Yeah. So that's been going on, and so they follow the same playbook in Ukraine. So you don't know all these. We don't know how many mercenaries or volunteers are actually in Ukraine for sure, and we certainly don't know how many of them, like you just said, resigned the day before they went to Ukraine out of the US military. But what's different in this case is that
you have active.
It seems like these guys
NATO,
are actually still members of. Because how are you going to get a whole tank crew together? You know what I mean?
Now, it's obvious when you think about it, because it was even articulated by media reporting at the time. Whether it was the Abrams tanks, the Leopard tanks, the Challenger 2s, or any of the Bradley fighting vehicles, they all said, but even if we get to them, put them on the ship and it arrives in Ukraine, how do we train them? And that was kind of wishy-washy. Yeah, it might take X months. We'll meet them halfway. We'll meet them in Poland. We'll train them there. But that's not enough time. They didn't learn how to use those vehicles so quickly. So maybe some of them, it's a mix. It's going to be a mix. Some of them for sure were able, they're smart enough to actually, learn how to use it sufficiently. But they had to be surrounded by people who are competent in repair, in the use of them and the repair of them. Yeah. So you have got whole brigades, or whole units at least, individual units. The volume, I don't know about. Now there's a whole other layer of reporting to take into account over the last year, and that's the Russian side. It's easy just to go, well, it's all propaganda. They may not make hay with it by publishing the evidence they surely have, like of these guys. They must have documentary evidence. It's all over Russian Telegram channels. When they do find, they publish everything they come across, generally, except this kind of stuff. Nevertheless, for the last year, what was I going to say?
Move on. Throw that up there, Scotty, because this is related. I want you to talk to me about this. It doesn't seem to be related to that German Leopard crew, but it is related. And it's okay. So it's a story about a French general. This is from August 19th. French general in charge of Notre Dame construction found dead in the Pyrenees. What's that got to do with Ukraine?
I think we should go in sequence, though. Well, the only reason we're looking at this is because of a tweet by.
Yeah, but we can follow up with that. But let's just introduce it this way. So this is the story. French general, and you go, oh, that's interesting. And, we find out that he's a former French army chief in charge of restoring Paris's Notre Dame Cathedral after it was devastated by fire, a suspicious fire, in 2019. And he died during a mountain hike. And just to give you an idea, if you go down, Jean-Louis Georgelin died on Friday in the Pyrenees mountain range straddling the France-Austrian border, whatever, said the prosecutor's office in the southern French city of Foix. Notre Dame has lost the overseer of its rebirth, said France. One of its great servants.
Said France, yeah, right.
So a 5-star general who was the French army's chief of staff between 2016 and 2010. Georgelin supervised operations in the Ivory Coast, Afghanistan, the Balkans, and Lebanon. So
what's amazing is how that was just eaten up totally uncritically in France.
Absolutely done.
No one.
But the thing is, he's a well-known general. He'd be on the equivalent of like Milley or let's say Petraeus, or someone who has that level of profile, because there are a lot of generals, let's say, or significant number of generals in France and other high-level members of the military who are now retired.
No, he's a 5-star general who was a French Army's chief of staff, so he's the top guy.
And also in the public sphere. In the public sphere,
because for the last
3 years.
couple of years, he's been giving press conferences, giving people VIPs tours around Notre Dame as it's rebuilt. He's been getting in small bickering fights about the rebuilding of Notre Dame. My first thought when I saw that was, whoa, I wonder what that's anything to do with, information about what happened to Notre Dame. But no. His controversies are to do with the process of rebuilding it, because Macron was pressuring him to get it rebuilt in time for the Olympics next year. But anyway.
So why did this peak?
Why would we even mention
interest?
it? Well, it's noteworthy in itself, because it's a strange way to die for a man who's, he may have been 74, but come on, he just fell in the Pyrenees and that's it. And then, by the way, he was given a full state military funeral, full honours. He's buried right there in the top French military museum next to Napoleon. So Macron was there, TV cameras, full presentation, very somber affair too. You think something really like extreme, they made clear to clarify that they didn't. I should be careful how I cite this. They did give the impression that he died in the line of duty, that he died. But they said that was because he was helping the reconstruction of Notre Dame. But it didn't. The military jingle didn't fit with his official job. Okay, whatever. The reason we would, maybe if we'd been French and paying closer attention to the news, that would have crossed our feeds, and we'd have gone, what the hell? But actually, the first person to go, what the hell, was this guy. This is a hell of a tweet in August. No one has responded to this except for NATO trolls. There's been no official response, no nothing. No. Usually they take what Medvedev says and turn it into lampooning or mocking the French state. No one responded to this. This is the deputy Russian ambassador to the United Nations. The French have found a new scenario for legalizing the deaths of their top military in Ukraine. Look how that's stated matter-of-factly. Reporting the death of General Jean-Louis Georgelin, former chief of staff of the French Armed Forces, during an unexpected hike in the mountains. The 75-year-old general, who had never been interested in mountaineering before, suddenly developed a love for mountain tourism and went on a hike in the Pyrenees, alone, and fell in the area of the Foston Pass, which is located at an altitude of 2,650 meters. In short, another case of inexplicable desire of NATO generals for solitary, dangerous journeys, ending in extensive injuries as if from a close explosion of heavy ammunition.
Yes.
We'll get back to the rest because he's got more, but he is clearly speaking from the position of someone who knows something. Mm-hmm. He didn't just concoct that.
No.
I.e., this man was in Ukraine and we killed him in an airstrike.
Yeah, at one of those, on one of those operating centres that they've been targeting, or even at one of the restaurants that there was at least one or two strikes on, places where mercs and NATO operatives were known to eat, basically. Just the most recent one was a few months ago, I think. There's video footage of it. So, it could have been anywhere, basically.
It's been a euphemism since, I think, they first attacked the Crimea Bridge last September. They warned, and they began using this euphemism, the Russians, that if you keep doing stuff like this, terrorist stuff, attacking Crimea or Russia proper, we will begin targeting, quote, key decision-making centers. Now, I always thought that the assumption that came in that loaded euphemism was somewhere, maybe inside NATO, somewhere outside, somewhere beyond.
Yeah, no.
No,
it's too far.
No. Key decision-making centers within Ukraine at which high-profile military VIPs from the West are in attendance.
That's Russia's attitude all along has been, in this conflict, has been to escalate only in response to escalation, and to not take any preemptive action. Obviously, they escalated in the sense of actually invading Ukraine, but that was arguably as a result of a provocation and putting Russia in a position where they had no other choice to do that. So Russia, if you look at Russia's history, they never do anything preemptive or provocative unless it's genuinely in their own self-interest. And when they get into a conflict, they match escalation with escalation. Not directly, but for them, basically, attacks against Crimea, effective attacks against Crimea can only happen with the direct help or provision of weapons to do so and targeting by the West. So that's a step. Russia's always accepted that, you guys are going to supply Ukraine with all these weapons and all this kind of stuff. You're going to do all sorts of things. You're going to give them intelligence to fight the war on the battlefield. Fine, we'll just carry on. We'll deal with that. But if you go beyond, if you start trying to target, Russian territory, including Crimea, then that's a level up, and we're going to respond in kind. We're going to make it painful for you if you do that.
Yeah,
we're not going to
keep trying to make it painful for us,
right?
So
and we respond.
Yeah,
and we have ways to do that.
Okay.
So anyway, yeah.
So that's Georgian land. That's the only. There's no evidence. The only thing is that statement from the Russian deputy ambassador to the UN. No one has counted it. No one has lampooned it.
No
one has nothing.
You know what he said there about taking falls with injuries consistent with. I mean, because in the actual report on all the reports on his death from his so-called or supposed hike in the Pyrenees is that he fell while. And they give the location, whatever the name of the place, and they put in on most of them they put in the height, and it was 2,650 meters, but they didn't say. It's almost like they're putting in that he fell from 2,650 meters. You know what I mean? Because he's pretty badly beaten up. Because if you fall from that height, he just did a Homer Simpson all the way down the mountain, right? Bonk, 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 bounced himself 2,650 meters down the mountain. Because that's consistent with
the injuries.
Because someone the prosecutor, the procurer, whatever in Foix, in the nearest town, the administrative town close to the mountains there, somebody had to sign off on it and look at the body.
This is what begs the question.
Or did they? Is there so much leverage we don't even have to provide a procurer with a body to get him to sign on?
I hope not, because if they did, think about it. Flesh this all the way out to the end.
No pun intended.
It means they have to airlift what was left of the corpse and put it in the mountains.
No, well, maybe. Well, it's not the procurer. It's not the guy in Foix, the administrator in Foix, who actually goes and gets the body, right?
Of course not.
It's delivered to him by whoever.
Yeah.
Right? So that can be done, let's say.
Well, you really think that's done by whoever?
It could be done in the sense where, you could deliver a body to the place where it's meant to be assessed for identity and an official file written up, right?
I hope not. I'll tell you why. I hope it's just being done with a wink and a nod and a handshake among all. We're all Freemasonic friends or something like this. We all know not to talk.
Probably.
Because if it's not, remember the tenor of, and we're just on the first half of that tweet by Polyanskiy. The tenor of it was, he's fed up because he's seen this over and over again. He's describing Georgian Lang as the latest incident because it had happened the week before he made the tweet. Mm-hmm. For God's sake, how much longer is this going to go on for? The Russians are watching this and they know what's going on in the West, and there isn't even the slightest wink of media investigation. Mm-hmm. There isn't even a conspiratorial fervor online about it because no one's talking about this. People are talking about it. They wonder if, how many Americans are really there and stuff, but they're thinking grunts, like those Bundeswehr guys. Yeah. Are they sending our boys over there? Yeah. Well, hang on. This is like the former chief of the armed forces of France.
Right.
Okay.
But that's why it has to be kept. That's why it had to be kept under wraps. That's why this would have happened. If someone like that, especially since he's retired, okay, he's brought back into service, like we were saying earlier on. Any country, any NATO country, Western country that's shipping weapons, large amounts of weapons to Ukraine, they're sending military personnel, high-level military personnel from that country with those weapons to oversee the disbursement of them and the use of them, right? You don't just dump them at the border and say, see you guys, have fun.
That's what I thought was happening.
Yeah, but so there's
high-level, for thinking that
there's high-level personnel from every single NATO country that is supplying weapons, and even ones that aren't supplying weapons to Ukraine in that country and have been since the beginning. Which is why it's been relatively easy for the Russians to actually target them, because they keep coming back, right?
Yeah.
They go back for a weekend, back home, or whatever, and then they come back again. So it's fairly easy over the course of a long period of time for them to track the movements or get a read on the movements of these people and find out what they're doing. And they don't do anything initially. They just watch and let them set up and let them establish a routine, kind of lull them into a false sense of security in a certain sense, and have no intention of actually targeting them unless the West at some point decides to escalate, and then boom, we've got all this information of watching your generals or your former generals who are in the country overseeing the provision of these weapons, and boom. So, but that guy, because he was such high profile, because like I said, there's plenty of generals in France, there's plenty of other high level military personnel who nobody knows about. They're not public figures. This guy was a public figure. He was overseeing the reconstruction of Notre Dame. He was on TV giving interviews about it and all that kind of stuff. So he was kind of like he was like one of our, kind of almost storied, military personnel. He was held in high regard.
Elder statesman.
So for him to be wiped out, immediately there'd be questions amongst the French population. What the fuck are you doing? I mean, just what? Yeah. This guy, I mean, really? That's like too much, I mean,
we're in too deep here.
Yeah, not only that, but it's just like we liked him, if you know what I mean. He didn't deserve that fate. Why are you sending those people to Ukraine?
Remember, the whole premise being sold to everyone of late is we need to keep sending billions to Ukraine. It's only 5% of our military budget because this costs us nothing in body bags.
It's free, yeah.
Right. If one of these stories breaks out, it's curtains. Yeah. Let's go back to that tweet because he named one other person as an example. 2 other incidents, 1 person. Okay. It's interesting when they will get tired of playing games, i.e. again, Polyanskiy is saying, I've seen this lots of times before now. When will it finally be recognized that the entire NATO bloc is waging war against Russia on the territory of former Ukraine? This, of course, has been Russia's message all summer long. Lavrov repeated at the UN last week, we're at war with NATO. It's not being hyperbolic. It's based on these facts. Well, these facts they're insinuating at, but they don't actually expose. Whatever. They will soon run out of falling private planes, sinking yachts. Are they referring to specific incidents? And the mountains will be littered with the bodies of officers from NATO who decided to take a solitary walk along mountain trails. And here's another example. In addition to the mountain adventurer, on August 1st, General Potts of the U.S. Armed Forces died in the state of Maryland. He felt the urge to fly alone on a private plane on which he crashed. Right, there's another one. Let's look at Potts first, though, before we talk about the last one. Okay, I looked this up. This indeed happened, as described here by Polyanskiy. Oh shit, wrong report. That's the next one. Potts. Sorry, here we go. This is one of the earliest reports on it. There's no real update since then. The National Transport Safety Board have since said they'll look into it. It might take 2 years to find out what happened to his plane. Anyway, here's the initial local media report. Polyanskiy was wrong. It wasn't August 1st. It was July 25th. Okay, sorry, this isn't the earliest report. This is an update, but whatever. It contains the details. So scroll down there. Havre de Grace, interesting French name, but whatever. This is in Maryland. The fatal plane crash that killed Army Major General Anthony W. Potts on July 25th. According to the report, Potts had a brief discussion with an aircraft technician about his upcoming flight in his own private single-engine Piper PA aircraft. Minutes before its tragic takeoff last month. He informed the technician he intended to fly the propeller aircraft around the airport's traffic pattern that evening. Maybe he was just testing it after repairs, whatever. Moments after takeoff, Potts' plane tragically crashed in a hayfield somewhere outside Baltimore. Okay. So that happened, so to speak, to Potts. Officially, it's recognized in the United States that a U.S. Army general, Major General, so he's like 3-star general, had indeed died. Go back to the tweet. The deputy ambassador of the Russian government to the United Nations is claiming that this Potts, he's insinuating, he didn't actually say it, but given what he just said about George and I, he's insinuating that Potts was actually on active duty for the United States military in Ukraine where he was killed. Yeah. And then either macabre, I don't think it's that macabre, his body is either brought back and put on a plane and it's made to crash, or a crash happens, maybe with no one in it, and there's a backstory prepared. Someone in the local police is in on it.
Another angle is no crash happened.
Well, I've wondered that because this is obviously spurred
You have
me to
to
go
check
and look
flight
at
radar.
a shitload of crashes and incidents involving U.S. military over the last year, of which there are many all over the world. You know, in this case, there is actual a still from video footage taken off a field with the apparent wreckage of a plane.
Okay.
So in those cases, I think it's legit because someone on the scene takes video or takes a photo and a plane crashed there or whatever. In other cases, though,
How far do they go though to cover that up? If it's important enough for them, imagine you're in that situation and it's important enough for them to make sure that no one finds out by the media. There's no official recognition that a high-level military general, a major general from a NATO country died in Ukraine, was killed in Ukraine. You don't want to recognize that at all. But the guy is dead. You could just say nothing, but word would probably come out. Where is he? What happened to him? So you realize you have to have a story about it. So how far do you go then? Once you're faced with that problem, how far do you go? What way do you deal with it? You've got a dead body.
or you don't, because he's now in Russia.
Or maybe there
the
isn't.
territories, they couldn't find it. It's buried under rubble.
Well, if it's killed in Ukraine, though.
If it's killed on the Ukrainian side, I suppose they can get it.
These have been attacks, generally speaking,
Inside
Ukraine, taking out high-level
Okay.
decision-making centres, right? So probably you have a body of some description.
You can get the body. Okay.
You can bring it back home or whatever, but the family have to be kept
The family needs a reason.
on the lowdown.
And his anyone under his command.
They can either be
That can
told.
be a lot of people.
They can either be, yeah.
They need a cover story.
Yes, they need a cover story. Some of them can be told. Maybe the family can be told. Maybe they knew he was in Ukraine and he was doing service to his country and it's very sad, but listen, we don't want this to get out, so what do we do? Well, he needs to die in some other way in the US because he's basically gone and we can't just say nothing about him forever. He'll have just more or less disappeared. He needs to have died in the US in some normal way, like hiking in a mountain or on a plane crash. So how far do you go to create the condition or fabricate the story that's actually happened? Do you just have someone fly, if he had a plane, have someone fly his plane up into the air, with connivance of his family, obviously, maybe fly it up into the air,
Maybe
jump out of a parachute and let it crash?
The technician's job the night before was, in fact, to be able to remote control it or something.
Well, you just
They
get
set it
someone
up.
to fly up and jump out in a parachute.
Oh,
and let it crash.
parachute,
Just
right, yeah.
parachute out and crash. Do you go to that?
Yeah, how far do you go? Well,
it's hilarious,
it's-
to think that they'd go to that length.
I know this is what we're left with. It's bloody hell. It's like
Because this is based on the premise that we're believing this Russian the
Well,
ambassador to the UN. We're believing because it's
not necessarily believing, but
well, we think it's highly likely that, given the context
yeah.
and the circumstances, it's highly likely that there are high-level members of NATO Western countries who have been targeted and killed in Ukraine.
okay, but yeah, okay. We're speculating based on what he has claimed and the fact that no one has responded to it, no one's called him a liar or anything. So how far will they go? The last paragraph in his tweet gives some idea as to how far the Russians think,
Mm-hmm. They're
not
willing
just
to
the
go.
Americans, but the French and the British or whoever else are willing to go. Let's read the last one. And a few months ago, quote, a helicopter crashed in the mountains of Mexico. Mexico, as far as I know, is not involved in Ukraine, but whatever. End quote. With a group of officers who were most likely planning to visit the Vinnytsia House of Officers the day before. ... End cryptic message. Well, holy smokes. I was like, what the hell is he talking about? Again, there's no one else has done anything on this, but this is the best I can find. Okay. So you got to work backwards from what he's saying. First of all, it seems most likely we can establish, in fact, the last phrase in his sentence, which is something happened at the Vinnytsia House of Officers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. A few months ago. Whatever. Let's have a look. There was indeed a Russian... Well, again, according to the Russian MOD, but Russian MOD claimed they did this. An airstrike on Vinnytsia. It's not a few months ago. It's actually
July
a
last
whole
year.
year ago. It's 15 July. Pay attention to that date. 15 July 2022. We'll just read the first two paragraphs. Russia's Defense Ministry for the first time confirmed the missile strike on the House of Officers building in Vinnytsia. Mm-hmm. The launch of caliber high-precision sea-based missiles is mentioned in the daily briefing of the Russian MOD. The facility hosted a conference of the Ukrainian Armed Forces Command with representatives of foreign armament suppliers aimed at discussing the issues on sending another batch of aircraft destruction means, as well as on organizing the reparation of Ukrainian aircraft. Foreign armament suppliers. So that's not like some lawyer from Raytheon, it turns out, most likely. It's actual commanders, military commanders, including high-level ones. It's not young guys on, covert special ops, CIA cover. They're sending the top commanders, apparently.
Well, the fact that that Vinnytsia House of Officers, which was, there's some allegation that it was used by Nazis, and which wouldn't be inappropriate during World War II, and it has been around since World War II. But this is like Euromaidan Press. Now, you can't get anything more pro-Ukrainian than Euromaidan Press, and this is from around the time last year, July 17th. Vinnytsia Concert Hall, or officers' house, that was hit by Russia won't be completely dismantled. Only damaged structure will be dismantled, said the Oblast authorities. It survived World War II, will endure this one too. It has already become a symbol of Vinnytsia's resilience. So here's the thing.
Well,
yeah. So this happened, basically, is what we're saying. And
that actually happened.
Ukrainians didn't dispute it. It's the House of Officers. Nobody disputes that was location where for gatherings of Ukrainian and Western, state actors, basically, and military actors, in terms of who are supplying weapons to Ukraine.
But no one knew until this hint was put out by Polyanskiy that it contained like some senior people.
Well, you always have assumed that there were, important people involved in that process, but who are they? So in a certain sense, it isn't that big of a story, except the West are making it a big story by covering up the death of these people. Why not just go, we kind of said,
made it a big story by the core messaging in response to the backlash in Britain, in France, and the United States, and everywhere else, Germany. The backlash is, this is going too far. We cannot have an actual honest-to-God war with Russia. This is crazy. And their governments are messaging them, bombarding them day after day. It's okay. It's only costing us some money. No one's lives are at stakes here. That's the lie. That's one layer of the lies in the Ukraine war. And this is the last one to be exposed, I believe. Okay. Sorry to do this again. Can you go back to that tweet just so we can have in our minds clearly the reference to Mexico? What the hell? So we saw that Vinnytsia really happened. The Russians did strike there. What he's suggesting is that, quote, a helicopter crashed in the mountains of Mexico, end quote, inside of which helicopter contained a group of officers who were planning to visit Vinnytsia, i.e., that's a super coy way of saying they were at Vinnytsia, but their deaths are kind of backdated so that they couldn't have been there. So then I looked and I thought, well, okay, what the hell happened to Mexico? This is the best fit I can find, okay, in time anyway. I'll send it to you there from US News. It was very briefly reported, but it was by Reuters and AP. 2 paragraphs. Notice the date, July 15th, 2022. It's the same date as Vinnytsia airstrike. Mexico's Navy said Friday that 14 people were killed and another person was injured after a Black Hawk military helicopter crashed in the northern state of Sinaloa, which is, fairly close, I presume, to the United States border. The cause of the crash is being investigated, but so far there was no information indicating the incident was related to the arrest of drug lord Rafael Quintero in another part of Sinaloa on Friday, the Navy said in a statement. What a strange thing to add. They add a connection with another thing going on, a drug bust in another part of the state, and say there's no connection to it. Okay, well, why did you mention it in connection with it then? So that's it. That's pretty much all the information that's been published on that. So,
yeah,
to go with this, Dmitry Polyanskiy, remember, deputy ambassador, so he's basically a Russian spy. All ambassadors are spies, basically. That's their craft. That's where they came from. He's one of them. He's on the inside. Is dropping hints in a tweet that the 3 incidents we've looked at were cover stories for the deaths of senior and who knows middle rank whatever active duty American, French, and probably more military personnel on mission in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And that the lengths they're willing to go to maintain the lie that we, quote, are not at war with Russia, which is again repeated for the millionth time last week by NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg. We are not at war with Russia. This is how far they're willing to go to protect that lie.
It's an example of the information war, which is a major part of any conflict, especially in this age, in the internet age. A major part, the information war is paramount for these people, and this is an example of how far they're willing to go to massage the information that is received by Western audiences. They're so sensitive, so particular, they don't want Western audiences to know that Russia has taken out high-level military personnel from NATO countries, the US, France, probably the UK as well, in Ukraine. They don't want the public to know that those kinds of people are operating there, although anybody with any sense would assume they are, and they certainly don't want people to know that Russia has the capability of taking them out, because it's a propaganda win.
Yeah.
And no propaganda wins are allowed, as we know, for Russia.
Yeah.
And the Russian ambassador is just getting a bit pissed off with it. He's like, for fuck's sake, dude, like, I mean, we're having a war. Can you not accept the fact that if you're going to go like almost all in on a war, at least on a proxy war, where you're at war with Russia in everything but name, that you're going to lose personnel, including high-level personnel, if you put them there? Why don't you just... What kind of a...
It's a faggy...
How cowardly, is that, you know? And I don't want to associate faggy with cowardly.
No, I don't.
Because...
I'm reclaiming the word there for meaning. Yeah.
What it used to mean, which was just...
Which limp-wristed kind of, you know...
Yeah.
It's the pure superficiality.
It's pusillanimous.
It's the furthest from the core value that used to uphold everyone in the West, which was honor.
The image they portray.
Honor. It's the polar opposite to honor.
Yeah, but they're waging an honourable war still, right? Supposedly.
Only in the propaganda level.
Yeah.
And then
in reality,
you eat through all these layers of lies, and this is the kind of shit they go through at the very bottom of it, you know?
Yeah.
Now we have a framework. A useful potential framework. Of course, it's circumstantial. It's he said, she said, but still, you saw the tenor of the content. The likelihood.
I mean, put it this way, who's going to disagree? What sensible person is going to disagree that at this point, over 18 months into the conflict in Ukraine, that the West is clearly waging against Russia, but using Ukrainian hands and bodies? Who's going to disagree that in that process of sending massive amounts of weapons and organising the Ukrainian war, that is an American, essentially Western war against Russia, organising it using the Ukrainians, that there's not going to be a significant number of Western personnel in that country? And who then is going to argue that there is, or disagree with the idea that the Russians are eventually going to get a read on these people who are coming into the country and are likely going to target them? And then in some of those cases, they're going to die. So I mean, no sensible person can disagree that it's very likely that after 18 months, high-level members of Western militaries have died in Ukraine.
Yeah.
That is done, right?
Yeah.
If you don't agree with that, get out of the room. You're not a serious person. Yeah. But then you put this together, what we're just looking at, and you go, wow, that adds another twist to it, where they're so sensitive about losing any of their special NATO, warriors, that they're going to make up stories and propagate them to the public via the media
and give them a fake.
He died in a fall. He died in a boating accident.
Not only was
he ate peanut butter and had an allergic reaction.
Not only was their last military service to their country clothed in fakery, their very deaths were clothed in fakery.
Yeah, which is pretty ignoble.
It's so like. Who wants to fight for that? I mean, there's no honor in that.
Not at all, no.
It's revolting. And now, I mentioned earlier that the Russians are very quiet on the QT about this. At the beginning, it was a bit different. There are quasi-official Telegram channels, where like the guys who would be embedded with the forward units on the Russian side, they did publish a lot of stuff. They would find the passports of Americans or some kind of ID, maybe dog tags and stuff that would ID them as Americans or British or French. There was a ton of rumors around Mariupol during the siege that they were trying to get helicopters in to airlift colonel and major levels of French officers and American officers. You remember those rumors?
Yeah.
Never confirmed because the Russians backed away from like showing the bodies or actual mug shots.
Because they have a bit of decency still left, a bit of respect still left.
But it means it was happening back in May 2022.
Yeah. Did you see the Irish Republican Brotherhood Fenian just emphasising, overemphasising his identity there. The Brits did the same thing in the north. Senior soldiers killed by active service units would turn up dead in a car crash in Germany. That's in Northern Ireland during the Troubles.
Interesting. To minimise the propaganda value of the other being, well, first a valid opponent in military speaking, because they of course try to paint them as all terrorists, and secondly,
for
morale purposes.
In the case of Northern Ireland, and also in the case of probably in Ukraine, the point of that was that the deaths of those people killed by, identified as British agents and killed by the IRA, they couldn't be announced publicly. First of all, their lives were kind of secret anyway. What they were doing in Northern Ireland, like what these people were doing in Ukraine, was secret. It's not public information. And not only that,
military operation.
But the nature of what they were doing was secret for a reason, because if it became public knowledge, it wouldn't be received very well by the public, because they basically are involved in extrajudicial killings and terrorism and ignoble things.
Yeah.
So they have to be, their deaths are either just not recognised and they just disappear and nobody ever talks about it, or if there's some chance that it would get out somehow, some snoopy journalist or something would get out and reveal it, there has to be a
offshore
in
that context, right? Back to Germany
or wherever.
So now you've got a framework for having in mind, we'll never know one way or the other on any of these incidents, but take note of the number of reports in recent times of accidents on military bases or off them, or training involving
military personnel,
drills and stuff. For example, one from CNN in August. We'll never know, but now you cannot take what they claim at face value. This is a story of an Osprey aircraft crash killing 3 U.S. Marines in Australia. Not just in Australia, on a remote island off Australia. There's no footage, no documentary evidence. They just have the Pentagon's word for it. But it's 3 named people. It's got their photos. They're real people. I don't doubt they died in some circumstance. Was it in these circumstances? Maybe yes, maybe no. Here's another one from July. This actually involves Australian soldiers who no doubt are also in Ukraine, because they're always Johnny on the spot whenever Uncle Sam says jump. 4 Australian army crew dead after helicopter crash during joint war games with the US. Now, that's plausible. There's a lot of stupid stuff happening with the military these days. Look at that Egypt who ejected from his F-35 last week for no good reason, it seems. And so on. So I've got other examples. Oh, here's one more I want to cover, okay? Before we do the propaganda counterexample, that's important to wrap up the point we're making here. This is about an ongoing issue involving a U.S. airbase. So it's not overseas. It's not involving war preparations or war drills. It's just the normal day-to-day stuff, right, at home. Air Force Base in Oklahoma, Tinker Air Force Base, 17 people dead in 2023. Military refuses to reveal causes.
On one base.
On one base. Now, I looked at general stats. Since 9/11, suicides on U.S. bases are off the charts. So are murders, rapes. It's mayhem. And some of them are like mini cities. Well, there's a lot of people on these bases. So, there's plausible background reasons for why people end up dead on the base or buried under the base or whatever else. There's also fragging, of course, a culture of abuse for conscript, for for young cadets and so on and so forth. Who knows? But this is more interesting because it's recent. It's a couple of weeks old or a month old now, this report, and the military won't talk about it. They don't say, suicides.
I think you mean hazing.
Hazing.
Fragging something else.
Okay.
That's deliberately killing.
So, yeah. Okay. So, okay. Here's the counterexample. Also from this week. It just happened, in fact, a couple of days ago. Let's watch the video first. This is why they know. This is part of why they would go to such lengths to cover up the deaths of their senior commanders in Ukraine. What's this? Okay, so that's the air cruise missile attack on the Sevastopol headquarters, or at least one building.
Naval.
You can see it's an old building, naval headquarters of the Black Sea Fleet in Crimea. Direct hit, success from the air. Russian air defense couldn't stop it. Looks bad for Russia, right? Everyone agrees with that. The Russian Ministry of Defense reported that one service member was killed in this attack. That seems implausible. Look at the scale of the bombing. But then they clarified that they justified that by saying, well, actually, the building in question is more like a part that's a museum rather than an actual functional meeting place, like the place in Venetia was. They then updated to say that actually no one was killed. We just got one serviceman who's missing. Now, Kiev has made hay with this. They've officially reported all over Western media today that they hit a gathering of senior naval officials, causing casualties among top commanders and resulting in dozens of deaths and injuries.
Yep.
So they're claiming what the Russians actually succeed periodically in doing with meetings of top commanders in Ukraine. Right? Most likely that is not actually the success. This was more like a PR success because it looks good, like they've hit a key site. Well, but unless the Russians are joining in the bullshitting and actually 16 officers were killed, well, now they're saying it's just one.
Yeah, you can't know, but that's attempted revenge. That's the level this is NATO. Obviously, it's not Ukraine firing those. It's British or US military personnel. They're Storm Shadow missiles. They're British-made cruise missiles, and that's them attempting to hit Russian decision-making centers in Crimea, or important operational centers in Crimea. I just want to move on to I don't want to waste all our time on this. Go ahead. Sorry,
I know, but there's another level to the propaganda. It's not just that we're hitting them back after they hit us. The thing is, when the pro-Russian types, you've seen them, when they see that, they go all doomer. Yeah. And they think, and invariably the reaction is 100% the same. When is Russia going to, come on, step up and hit them back? But what they don't know is that Russia's been smacking them all over the place. Right. And then it's buried. Yep. And Russia tacitly agrees not to leverage its propaganda. Yep. It could get propaganda out of that. They don't know the Russians has smacked them all over. That's not the way
Russia wages the war, because they know they're in a dominant position, so they don't have to do that. It's the power in the weak position that doesn't really have the wherewithal to do what it's claiming that it's doing, especially when they're lying about what they're doing. So obviously they're not going to do what they're claiming they're doing, so they have to rely heavily on propaganda. Whereas Russia, basically as a general rule, the country that does not engage in that level of propaganda, like shoving things in people's face and saying, yay, we got them and all that kind of stuff, is the country that feels that it has right and authority on its side and that it can achieve what it's setting out to achieve. The country that uses propaganda is the one that's bullshitting for a start about why it's doing what it's doing, and probably doesn't have the ability to follow through in what it claims it's doing, even though the claim is false. This is kind of staying with Ukraine, but it's an interesting point, just in case anybody's ever wondering why there's so much support for Ukraine. Because we're going to look at a bit of, especially from Justin Trudeau this week. It was just an awesome speech by Justin Trudeau. You get to see it in a minute. But this is our old friend Mitch McConnell in one of his lucid moments. He explains in 20 seconds why so many billions are being sent, particularly by America, but also this applies to European countries. But America is in the lead on this. Why they're sending so much money to Ukraine, and because it seems stupid. Why don't you spend it at home? Anyway, go ahead.
On another issue, looking forward to seeing President Zelensky on Thursday. I think it's always good to remind everyone that a good portion of the money allocated to Ukraine is being spent in this country to rebuild our industrial base.
Rebuild our industrial base. You can take him at face value at that in a certain sense, but what he's trying to say is that he's kind of pushing back against the people who would say, like, why you sent so much money to Ukraine when our infrastructure in the US needs a lot of investment and you're not doing it. Well, we are actually a good portion of that money. So when you hear, like, an extra 20 billion for Ukraine or an extra X number of billion from Ukraine, maybe divide it in half, and only half of that money is actually going to Ukraine. In fact, you could...
The rest is expanding factories.
You could almost say that none of it's going to Ukraine in a certain sense, except in the form of weapons. Some of it may be going for, into the into Kiev's coffers to kind of pay wages or something like that.
And to buy Lamborghinis.
Money out of a suitcase type thing for certain people. But a lot of it doesn't go anywhere near Ukraine. It stays in the US, goes from the Fed prints money and puts it down on the tally sheet and sends it to defense contractors to make the weapons that go to Ukraine.
To expand the factories and to employ more Americans.
Right, and to pay their wages and to...
more migrants,
right,
but whatever.
to buy weapons from the defense contractors with American taxpayers' money that then go to Ukraine. So it's not really staying in Ukraine, but then it's not really staying in America. It is, because it's supporting jobs, if only amongst defense contractors and the subset of contractors associated with those. And that implies that then translates into jobs for America and the American economy, supporting the American economy in that sector. But well, you'd have to look at who's on the board of defense contractors and the politicians that are on the boards of defense contractors as well. But
they're his donors.
Exactly, as well. They're paying.
That's why he's 90 and has obviously a brain issue.
Right,
but he's still
in
power, because he's probably literally propped up with dollars from Raytheon to say that.
And he's given money to he's lobbying for giving taxpayer money to Raytheon, who will make the weapons, who will also then in the next election cycle will drop a bunch of money into his campaign so he gets elected, so he can continue to lobby to give money to you. But that means he could war all the time, basically.
He could drop dead between now and then and he still get elected.
Yeah. Maybe he already
That's
did.
how solid the relationship is. Zelensky, did he go to Washington? I thought that was earlier. I thought he went to Canada.
No, he was at the UN.
Same trip. Oh, he was at the UN.
But he scooted up to Canada to see floppy head Trudeau. But here he is. Here's Zelensky at the UN. His accent's terrible.
He's spoken English.
Driving me bonkers. Yeah,
we're not going to listen to it, are we?
Will you hear? Just for
I don't listen to Nazis.
Just for the tenor, or for the some of the details actually. Oh, listen.
Even though humanity is failing on its climate policy objectives, this means that extreme weather will still impact the normal global life, and some evil state will also weaponize its outcomes. And when people in the streets of New York and other cities of the world went out on climate protest, we all have seen them. And when people in Morocco and Libya and other countries die as a result of natural disasters, and when islands and countries disappear underwater, and when tornadoes and deserts are spreading into new territories, and when all of this is happening, one unnatural disaster in Moscow decided to launch a big war and kill tens of thousands of people.
Thank you.
We have to stop it.
Stop it.
We must act united to defeat the aggressor and focus all our capabilities and energy on addressing these challenges. As
Which
nukes
ones?
are restrained,
Oh,
likewise the aggressor must be restrained, and all his tools and methods of war. Each war now can become final, but it takes our unity to make sure that aggression will not break in again. And it is not a dialogue between the so-called great powers somewhere behind the closed doors that can guarantee us all the new wars era, but open war of all nations for peace.
Thank you very much. So, what was your point again?
Wow, that was
Well, obviously, someone told me, listen, if you're going to get,
All over the
you can
place.
speak at the UN General Assembly, but you got to do the global warming thing. All right, I'll do the global warming thing. How?
But then he segues it into it's
he's
Russia's
like,
fault.
he just gives the standard global warming. We're all going to die, raising oceans, flooded streets, storms, heat waves, blah, blah. It's all terrible. And
That's
people
what-
protesting, we have to stop it. But the most important thing is that in the middle of all this, Russia started a war. And it's got nukes and it has to be stopped. But we have to stop all of it. You see, it's not just global warming. I want those global warming protesters or climate change protesters on the streets to also be carrying anti-Russian flags. Can we do that?
Well, you
please?
know they sent Greta to him a couple of months ago. Jeff summed it up in the chat. Actor saying his lines, literally.
Yeah.
There's that, but whoever wrote the lines is smarter than Zelensky at articulating it.
If you
When
think
Putin invaded Ukraine, we all remember he disrupted the jabby jab. They were lining up to either fine us all into prison or worse. They were going to line us up and stick it in the arms anyway. That was in the air. You remember the atmosphere. That's what it was in February 2022, and that stopped because he invaded Ukraine. The other thing he'd interrupted naturally would have been the whole package, because climate change, as they reminded us during COVID, is part of a peace with COVID.
yeah.
So the people who wrote the lines had the bigger picture in mind. He just delivered them terribly, but there is a link.
Well, is there? I don't know. Maybe. Unless in his head there is.
Well, yeah,
Have to
because
stop it all.
the whole globalist agenda is we got to get everything lined up for the big change, and Putin's gone and
Messed it up.
big
Yeah.
time.
Well, if you think, I know that probably now goes down in your list of like top 10 best speeches of all time, right?
Right.
I mean, it's up there, right? But it's such an awesome orator. But check this out, because I think this probably beats it.
Oh God.
Have a listen. It's short, don't worry.
Canadians know this is a question of right or wrong. Canadians know that, yes, it is incredibly hard for Ukraine to continue to stand against a Russian aggression. And let's be honest, it's hard for the democracies around the world who are there to support their citizens, who are investing for the future, who are challenged with a challenging economy around the world to continue to step up as Canada has.
By blocking their bank accounts.
$9 billion in aid for Ukraine. But we will, because the cost on Canadians, on our lives, on our world, will be so much greater if Putin wins this war that we will and have to stand every single day until Ukraine wins this war.
Niall!
It's interesting now. In light of our first discussion, isn't the energy in his voice and the extent to which a psychopath like that can be personally affected by it, he has in mind awareness that some of his Canadian troops have died in Ukraine for this war. See, he's informed by more than just acting his lines well.
He doesn't care.
That's why people are like, oh, bloody hell, that's very forceful, energetic. What's informing that? He is at war with Ukrainian servicemen.
Well,
are
people
at
like
war
him
with
don't
Russia.
care about dead soldiers. Like, that's not personal to him.
Well, in a superficial way.
He's in it for ideological reasons. I mean,
I'm not sure, but I think he was addressing also as that meeting was organized by some kind of Ukrainian diaspora group.
yeah. Well, that was
in
this was
Ukraine,
after
in
that.
Canada.
That followed on chronologically from Zelensky at the UN, and then Zelensky was up in Canada and pressed the flesh with Trudeau and stuff, and pressed probably a few other things. But anyway, and then that was Trudeau at a meeting with Zelensky, basically, talking, bigging up Ukraine in Hitlerian fashion. But and speaking of Ukraine and Hitler, again, same time frame after that kind of speech, or around the time of that speech, within a day or two, whatever. Zelensky's at the the Canadian Parliament. I've just put this up, and they had it. So Zelensky's there, being feted at Parliament. Standing ovation. He comes in, all that kind of stuff. If you click on the left one there, so that's Ukrainian President Zelensky, Canada's Prime Minister Trudeau. Recognized Yaroslav Hunka, who was in attendance and fought with the 1st Ukrainian Division in World War II, before later immigrating to Canada, in the House of Commons on Parliament Hill in Ottawa on Friday, September 22nd, so 2 days ago. So this is saying Zelensky's in Parliament, standing ovation, him and his wife. He's such a great guy. And then they honour this guy, Yaroslav Hunka, who is a 98 year old veteran. And obviously it's appropriate because he's Ukrainian. He fought against the Russians in the Second World War for Ukrainian independence, right? So it's very much appropriate to what's happening now. It's like this guy's just like, it's just like a repeat of history, right? What was he was doing back in the Second World War? That's what his descendants are doing today in Ukraine, and we need to honour him, right? Go to the video, you can just see the kind of... maybe go back to the... Is that it? You go back to the video at the bottom there. Pick it up. I think that just go right in the next one. There you go. I think that's it.
Zelensky's speech received at least a dozen standing ovations.
Awesome.
There was also one for this man, a 98-year-old Ukrainian Canadian who fought for Ukrainian independence against the Russians during the Second World War.
That was it. So that's the way the media reports it. But, and this is from actually a military, David Pugliese, a well-recognized Canadian military historian. And so you noticed in that tweet that, or in that report, that Yaroslav Hunka, who fought for the 14th Division, what did they say in the tweet? The 14th Division of the Waffen SS. That's not what's reported in the actual, the official media reports about it. This old guy basically, in 1944, he fought with the 14th SS Volunteer Division Galicia. Sorry, that's the wrong one as well. Anyway, it was called the 1st Ukrainian Division. Anyway, if you just go to that look, do a search for the word change. Yes. So this guy David Pugliese who wrote this is a fairly well recognized, legitimate mainstream military historian in Canada, and it just says there are members of the basically, where's the word change? Okay, members of the unit had surrendered to Allied forces and were being held in a camp in Italy in an attempt to hide the SS connection. The unit had changed its name in the past few days of the war to the 1st Division Ukrainian National Army. So in the tweet that we showed you, where it was claimed that this guy who's being feted in the Ukrainian Parliament alongside, or in the Canadian Parliament alongside Zelensky, as a hero in the past against anti-Russian aggression and representative of what's happening today, he actually was, during the war, he fought with the 14th Waffen SS Division Galicia, i.e. the Nazis. Not only Nazis, but secret service kind of Nazis, basically.
The specific units that went in and massacred Poles and Jews in Western Ukraine. Right. To cleanse Galicia, which is today.
So that's who this old guy fought with and was a member. That's a division he was a member. He was a member of a Nazi death squad, basically, fighting for the Nazis, killed Poles and Jews. And then in order to get to Canada, he came to Canada after the war. And even before they came to Canada, that unit within the Waffen SS division, the Nazi death squad, that was made up of Ukrainian nationals, they changed their name to the 1st Division Ukrainian National Army in order to smooth over any connection with the Nazis, and that's how he ended up in Canada. And today he's being feted in the Canadian Parliament.
It's fitting because you can make the case that genetically there's not really any such thing as Ukrainian. When they do genetic tests of Ukrainians, they invariably find they're mostly Russian with some maybe Polish or whatever. But Ukrainian as a psychocultural cohesive thing is a concept very much born in Canada.
Right.
Because the British and the American spies put them there, and
So
the
many
diaspora grew
Ukrainians
there.
went there, yeah.
So when Zelensky goes there, and when him and Trudeau are feted in Parliament, many of the people in that Parliament are the descendants of
Ukrainian.
essentially a Ukrainian cult that was bred in Canada over the last 80 years.
Interesting how that happens. Yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it amazing? And,
Setup.
and remember now what they've been hitting you over the head with the last year and a half. It's Russian propaganda to make the Nazi connection with Ukraine. I mean, the Nazi connection with Ukraine is so strong that the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada is the granddaughter of one of those guys, an actual Nazi Ukrainian, Freeland. It's not conspiracy. Everyone knows it, kind of thing. It's
At the time when it came out, she denounced it as Russian propaganda.
right.
That her parents were basically, were Nazi sympathizers.
She doesn't need to hide it anymore because now they've rehabilitated them all to Ukrainian national. To the point that the Speaker of the House introduced this Nazi war criminal as a hero.
Yeah.
We've crossed the Rubicon here. This is now open fascism. It also has the sickening effect of making you question the core premises of World War II. Was it to get the Nazis? There's enough circumstantial evidence that Alan Dulles was running around Europe trying to save as many of these shitheads as he could, specifically to incubate them in places like Canada so that they would be useful to get the Russians. It's one fucking long continuum. It really is. Today it's on a whole other level because they don't have to hide it anymore. It's all out in the open. Nazi shithead war criminal can be feted publicly. They all clap like
brain dead.
Then
hamsters.
Trudeau can go with Zelensky to basically a Nazi rally in Canada and spit that vitriolic.
Hitlerian.
He looks and sounds like a Nazi because it's no longer a similarity.
No,
it is it.
His mind is connected to the same kind of I don't know, part of the ether that connected the Nazis back in the day. That's what I think. Speaking of open fascism, can we move on to this letter?
To what?
To a letter from the Culture, Media and Sport Committee.
One last thing.
Go on.
Sorry. Incoming, Scotty. This just wraps up. Let there be any doubt in anyone's mind about the nature of the Ukrainian regime. You've probably seen it. Zelensky has appointed Marina Abramovich to be ambassador for Ukraine. It's not an official title. She will lend her voice to help rebuild schools in the country.
That's
for the children.
So that's open
for the children.
So along with open fascism, now we have open Satanism.
Yeah,
because she's basically,
she's
if you
the
want,
witch doctor
look her
for
up.
but
she is a very dodgy person.
Her and the Podestas
and
Pizzagate.
Not even Pizzagate. You look at her art. Just look at her art. And she's the ambassador. She's a perfect ambassador for Ukraine.
Yeah.
Perfect. In the sense that she's a Satanist. Oh my God. Yeah, that's just oh yeah, well, sure, why not? Yeah, do that. Do that too.
It fits. Go on.
Do it. Go on ahead. Do more. So this is just getting on a Russell Brand. There's a little update on that. I mean, in the past week we had you have a bit to mention on this, Neil, but this is a letter from Dame Caroline Dinenage, DBE, Dame of the British Empire, Member of Parliament and Chair of the Culture, Media and Sport Committee in the British House of Parliament. Anyway, so she wrote several letters, one to TikTok, one to someone else, maybe to Facebook, or not Facebook, maybe YouTube, or not YouTube, I don't know. Anyway, she wrote to Rumble and to TikTok. This one's to Rumble. And 20th September, dear Chris Pavlovsky, the CEO of Rumble. I am writing concerning the serious allegations regarding Russell Brand. in the context of it being a content provider on Rumble with more than 1.4 million followers. The Culture, Media and Sport Committee is raising questions with the broadcasters and production companies who previously employed Mr. Brand to examine both the culture of the industry in the past and whether the culture still prevails today. Okay, so that's not their concern. However, we are also looking at his use of social media, i.e. this relates to you, including on Rumble, where he issued his preemptive response to the accusations made against him by the Sunday Times and Channel 4's dispatches. While we recognise that Rumble is not the creator of the content published by Mr. Brand, we are concerned that he may be able to profit from his content on the platform. We're concerned that this guy who allegations have been made by unknown people and media companies dating back 13, 15 years, we're concerned that as a result of these allegations, none of which have been brought to the police and there is no court case or criminal case opened about them, but nevertheless we're concerned that you're still allowing him to make money. So we would be grateful if you could confirm whether Mr. Brand is able to monetize his content, including his videos, relating to the serious accusations against him. Serious? I don't know. Nobody knows if they're serious or not. If so, we would like to know whether Rumble intends to join YouTube, social proof, in suspending Mr. Brand's ability to earn money on the platform, i.e., get with the program here. We would also, this is an important passage here that I need some interpretation for. We would also like to know what Rumble is doing to ensure that creators are not able to use the platform to undermine the welfare of victims of inappropriate and potentially illegal behaviour. So this obviously relates to Brand in general. So we'd like to know what Rumble is doing to ensure that Brand is not able to, because it kind of basically says, she's basically saying that this is her justification, because the four paragraphs above have no justification for why Rumble should demonetize or basically, boot Brand on the basis of what are, as of now,
allegations,
unsubstantiated allegations. So she needs to give a reason for why she's asking them to do that. It seems like an unreasonable request, and she says so. She's trying to insinuate something here, which is that if they don't, then Brand might be able to use the platform to undermine the welfare of victims. So already there's a victim.
That's the key part. She's
victims of inappropriate and potentially illegal behaviour.
She's presenting as fact something that's. This is why it's a psychobabble reach.
So inappropriate behaviour. What is inappropriate behaviour? And if someone acts inappropriately towards someone else, does that make that person a victim? In what sense are they a victim? Like in the legal sense? I mean, would the inappropriate behaviour not have to be judged in a court of law and determined to be not just inappropriate but actually illegal, and therefore you have a victim? Not
anymore. Now it's you've offended me. I'm a victim.
Right, so it's a whole offence, and that's actually almost like a criminal offence offensive.
This is the goal that we're seeking the whole time with all that BS.
Right.
They could send a letter and it would be understood.
To get with the programme.
Yeah.
Well, luckily in this case, so it's amazing pseudo-legal psychobabble with lots of insinuations, but nothing to actually substantiate. Like basically, she's saying she has no case, she has no valid reason to ask Rumble or anybody to take money away from Brand or anybody else, but she wants them to do it anyway on the basis of
everyone else is doing
something, the current thing, something. And of course, luckily, Rumble responded like on Twitter and saying like, we got this letter. This is where the letter comes from. They posted it and they said, we got this letter. It's kind of ridiculous. It doesn't align with our policies. And the only way that we'll be taking down Brand's channel or demonetizing his channel, whatever, or removing him from our platform would be if somehow the US government was able to physically invade.
The British government.
The British government was able to invade the United States
and take our servers,
physically take possession of the servers. Yeah.
I love it. That's the American feeling comes through there. Of course, bless them. What they don't realize is that
it's kind of already done in a certain
sense. They can still get you. I mean, Rumble is still blacked out in France because of a dispute over something similar.
RT, no.
No, Rumble itself, you can't view Rumble in France.
Because of RT.
Oh, because of, they wouldn't remove RT content. Right, okay, because of the war, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. I never thought I'd do this. Well, at least not.
Oh, can we just wrap up?
On the same topic.
Yeah.
No, I never thought I'd do this on... I never thought I'd big up this person. But it's... this is probably 40 years ago. And it's only 16 seconds long. But it speaks...
Oh, my God. The Iron Lady.
I have a listen.
A court of law is the place where you deal with these matters. If you ever get trial by television or guilt by accusation, that day, freedom dies.
Well, Maggie knew it back then. And we were all raging against Maggie back in the day, but...
2 years later, I think that's 1991, there was the first, I think it was the kind of a marker event for where law became trial by media, and that was the O.J. Simpson case. He got off because of a successful victory in the court of public opinion, which leaned on the jurors and so on and so on. That literally happened soon after, the beginning of the sort of descent into this circus, this replacement of actual law with pseudo paralegal, extra as stuff, sanctions, this judicious decisions and sanctions handed down outside the actual law,
right,
and or what's broadly known today as lawfare,
right,
suing someone into oblivion. There's no real substance. The people who are doing it know they actually won't win, but in the meantime, you'll drain them of money, resources, energy, and friends and allies, and isolate them. And Julian Assange is the perfect example. It's a very comparable case with this because he's been isolated and contained. It's a bit like they treat him like he's a virus on a computer, and they've just quarantined and isolated him. And they know officially he's still got a pending appeal, and he might be extradited, he might not, but in the meantime, he'll just die alone in prison in a maximum security Belmarsh. That's what they would like to do with people like Brand eventually.
It's
they may not need to. They may be able to drain them.
It's the hallmark of totalitarian governments to do that kind of thing, right?
Well, Zeke Kyle, they all want us to pretty much salute.
There's a ray of hope, at least in this.
One other thing to mention, that it took six days to uncover that the woman who sent that letter
Right.
is married to the guy who was in charge of British psychological warfare operations online until last year, or deputy commander of the 77th Brigade.
Right.
Their explicit remit is to do shit like this.
Right. So she's just doing what her husband does.
It's amazing how quickly Twitter was like, it was 50-50. People were like pro-brand, anti, and then I'd weigh in and say, this is probably a coordinated campaign from the top. Oh, shut up, you conspiracy theorist. All those criticisms fell off a cliff when it was revealed who her husband was. Even Piers Morgan now is like, hang on, due process. They're backing down,
Yeah. Here's a little, I think it's a really good initiative, actually, and it's an example of the kind of pushback that's useful in the face of this nonsense. So there's a new website and a campaign that's going to be set up soon, or it's going to go live soon. If you scroll down a little bit, that's Sharon Davies. She's an ex-kind of Olympic swimmer, UK, and she's the campaign
sports presenter.
Yeah, and sports presenter. Yeah. So it's basically a website that is aimed at MPs who believe women can have a penis, and naming and shaming them ahead of the general election. So there's an army, supposedly, of volunteers in a new political grassroots campaign gearing up to meet all MPs and parliamentary candidates at hustings events and on their doorsteps to ask them one question: what is a woman? Their answers will be video recorded and uploaded individually to a website which is being launched in the coming months. That's perfect. That's just one. I mean, of course, you could ask them a bunch of other questions, but that's a very pointed one.
I bet only a minority of them answer clearly the correct answer.
Well,
Look at Trump last week equivocating.
Yeah.
He's like, well, I'm going to hedge my bets here.
Well, they don't realize that. I mean, I think the vast majority of people, or a significant majority of people in the UK and probably in most other countries, already know what the answer should be. Yeah. They know what they expect a politician to be able to say, and it's pretty clear cut, right? It's your mama, right? So if they don't say that, the fact that I'm no comment, that's an answer,
right?
they'll be shamed, and if they don't realize
Well, I'm not a biologist.
If they don't realize that answer is as bad as a yes, a man can be a woman, then they're stupid, you know. And it's trying to hit them at their. So insofar as the electoral process still works, and they actually care about what people think, and people actually can actually vote and influence who gets elected, then this is something any of them with any sense will have to think long and hard about, you know.
Yeah. That's clever. But the example in Ireland recently is, as long as one person asked the question, all it took was one guy, Ben Scallon, kind of a renegade journalist. But he's in the press pool. He writes for Grit, alternative new media online, right? Took Ben Scallon just asked one question of a committee that was in charge, I think, of pushing forward with a referendum to change the constitution again regarding specifically the role of a woman in society. And he said, can you please define before you ask of the Irish people how to change this definition in their constitution about the role of a woman? What is a woman? He wouldn't answer. I think the referendum was a no. We're not going ahead with this. Sometimes it's just one person to stand up, and the whole juggernaut stops in its tracks, you know. But they'll keep coming back. They'll never stop coming back. And enjoy your victories while you can, where and when you can get them. Enjoy yourself blue in the face, humiliating them or mocking them or laughing at them, but they won't stop coming. Horse face at the UN this week, you know. We need to limit free speech in order to protect it. Protect free speech. I mean, and that wasn't the reason they're at the UN is because the reason Zelensky's there, the reason Lavrov gave a speech is because it's UNGA time. UN General Assembly is usually in September. The theme the UN was pushing wasn't the global boiling. In fact, it was about literally that. Disinformation, misinformation. Secretary General was at it again, you know, talking about the gates of hell being opened because of free speech or something like that. I can't remember. He made some crazy statement as he pushed the agenda about basically, limits to free speech. About what we need to do to protect people's, you know, blah, blah. They're not going to stop. They're going to keep coming. But thankfully, human beings' ability to find the humor in things is also limitless. Psychos don't understand that.
Exactly. And speaking of did Horseface Jacinda's does her accent annoy you?
That's horrible.
It's horrible. It annoys a lot of people.
It's like chalk, you know, nails and chalk.
Somebody having a rib. This is from quite a long time ago, but it's kind of funny. This is New Zealand accent for you on a particular product.
If you're like me, you find it very hard to keep your dick dry. I left my dick unprotected and it was warped out of shape in no time. I could barely recognise my own dick. Imagine that. Then I discovered Schaefer's New Zealand style dick sealant. The best way to take care of your dick in 3 easy steps. First, wash your dick with soap and water. Then, wait for your dick to dry. Once your dick is clean and dry, paint your dick with Schaefer's dick sealant. I used to be too embarrassed to invite people over to see my dick. But now, my dick's the talk of the town. I even have pictures of my dick. Check out that dick. I'm going to send this to my secretary. Barbara always loves to receive my dick pics. After all, summertime is all about spending time on your dick. I'll often have 20 to 30 people on my dick at once. That can really wear your dick out, causing dick splinters and discoloration. But with Schaefer's dick sealant, my dick stays a nice golden brown colour. Who wouldn't want a golden dick? I used to never let children anywhere near my dick. My dick was too dangerous for cods to play on. But it seems like every cod in the neighbourhood's been on my dick this summer. And they've all had a good time. My dick's over 70 years old, but it looks brand new. That's part of the reason all my neighbours are jealous of my dick. Isn't that right, Jim?
Yes, you've got a nice dick, okay?
His wife is always on my dick, begging me to know the secret of my perfect dick. If you like Schaefer's dick sealant, check out Schaefer's New Zealand style cock. I had a huge hole in my dick, but I fixed it by jamming some cock in it. You'd be surprised how many things you can fix by jamming cock into them. Have an extra large hole in your dick? Try Schaefer's African style cock. Just go to your local home improvement store and ask for the big black cock. Schaefer's New Zealand style dick sealant. Don't put it on your penis. There's also a helpful number on the back. Hi. I've got a question about my dick. Schaefer's New Zealand style. Hey, get that squirrel off my dick. He knows he's not allowed to come on my dick.
Yeah. So,
9 years ago, 5 million views. That's brilliant.
but that's actually how they talk. I mean,
Yeah.
those are. I mean, that's not really exaggerating. I mean, that's
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
So-
bad.
So
to
that's-
clarify, we love Kiwis, just not psycho Kiwis.
Yeah.
And your accent's funny when you make it funny as well.
So there you go.
Yeah, that's all I got. It's going to be an interesting month, I think, coming up.
Yeah.
I can tell you, there's something in the air. Maybe it's revolution, maybe it's not. Don't know. I'm just seeing people like fed up. Specifically, people among that larger cohort who are new to this. They don't behave like they're prepared to spend the next 20 years like us, just observing it from afar. It affects them directly. Their kids are still in school.
Mm-hmm.
They pay a shitload of taxes. It affects them. It hits the purse here and now. You know, it's like we'll see.
All right. What did the parrot say when he turned 80?
Nothing about his deck.
Aye, matey. That was terrible.
But
All right, we're going to leave it there for this week, folks. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't take things too seriously because, well, it doesn't help. But stay tuned and keep your eyes open, keep watching, keep learning, and so we'll be back next week with another show. So until then, have a good one. See you later.
Thanks for watching. Bye, everyone.
Can't stop the signal now.